Welcome back to Inclusion Revolution. I'm your host, Tova Sherman. Again, Emma Halpern from the Nova Scotia Barristers Society, the Employment Equity Officer, is here telling us a little bit about what the Barrister Society in Nova Scotia has been doing in support of inclusion of all of our community. But of course, it being a show about Inclusion Revolution, we want to talk specifically about some of their goals around inclusion of persons with disabilities within the legal community and in relationship as clients as well. So Emma, when we broke, you were talking about one of the surprises that you had discovered in this outreach that the barristers had done, and that was around finding agencies were much more positive about lawyers in the legal community than you had perhaps anticipated. And I wanted to just make a comment to that because I was in that one of those focus groups. Yeah. And what I've determined is, as a great example, of course, is Reachability, the charity that I work with. And Reachability has over 280 volunteer lawyers across Nova Scotia who give their time for free to listen to and try to support persons with disabilities within the context of the program. And we also have the lawyers doing community outreach initiatives and speaking for groups and individuals as well that require supports. So I think what you're seeing is that there is, in my opinion, I've said this to you before, but a core group of lawyers who do so much in the community that they have really initiated a tremendous response from, for instance, agencies in the community who have utilized their services, and they have been such a great help too. As a result, I think that it's not surprising to me to hear the people on the ground working with the lawyers aren't necessarily the ones holding the stigma around what the legal community is, as much as individuals who maybe haven't had that close an experience other than their own individual issue trying to be addressed. So I think that's really why. But what I most want to know from you now is, what are the results? So you've got this information and you've really been surprised by some things and impressed by others, and you've sort of worked through it and made some decisions, I know, about some of the things you want to go and approach and try to address that came out of those consultations. And I wanted to hear a little bit about, is there any action going on right now? And forgive me, I have to ask that because often there's a lot of needs assessment, but there isn't always a lot of action. And I know you've done some really interesting things.
Yeah, so I think, there were some very positive things that came out of that study, and then there were some areas where we still definitely needed to work. And across the board, one of the things that has come out of that study and other sorts of research is that communication is a big issue for lawyers, and communicating in a way that is understandable by the general public. And that is particularly present for people living with disabilities and with mental health concerns. So that was certainly something that I'd like to sort of see us moving towards, is improving the way in which lawyers communicate. And so we've had a number of steps in that direction. I'm excited to be able to say that next month we have you coming to do a workshop with a number of lawyers on communication, particular to people living with disabilities. And I think that one of the things that actually came out of a committee, that I had sort of mentioned very briefly, is that we formed this committee as a result of some of these studies and some of this work to sort of say, well, where do we need to be going with this? At the equity office, I'm the equity officer, and I run the equity office. There's no other staff, and so I have a very, very large
I hope you're not too hard on yourself then. Sorry, get back to it.
Well, I do.
It's a small office, you're telling me.
I expect to be able to, solve all the problems for all historically disadvantaged communities and their.
God bless you, Emma Halpern. God bless you.
But so little small steps and working a bit at a time, and I do work with a number of different communities and try to support those communities as best I can. But one of the sort of things that I've adopted myself personally is some way to focus on a year-to-year basis on a specific community. So my hope is that next year I'll be able to do some real focused work for people living with disabilities and on mental health. So this committee is sort of a step in that direction. We also have some of this education work. I think education for me is really key. We need to be really bringing education to lawyers, and that is more than just a substantive law. I think
knowledge is power for everybody.
Yeah.
And although, whether it's legal or even the medical community, as much as they know, there's always room to take information. And, I believe this very strongly. We're sort of stirring back there. We get it, sort of, but we haven't really acted on it or thought about it in a practical, how is my office going to be different than other offices in terms of legal firms and so on. So I think it's really exciting, not just, as you said, like to bring me in, which I'm always happy to talk, that, but to bring me in and talk about the communication piece. But I know, as you said, you're trying to do some focusing on disability issues, and having heard some of the work your committee is doing, I'm exceptionally interested because I'm actually hearing about action, which within itself is kind of impressive. But the fact is, considering you're one person and a little committee, I'm impressed to hear, and I'd like you to share with us, if you don't mind, some of the specifics. You mentioned, of course, the Lunch and Learn that I'm going to be doing, but some of the other specific activities that you've already started to engage in through your committee that you feel will be making the legal community as a whole understand better and be more inclusive of persons with disabilities, whether their own or as clients.
Sure. So one of the things I'm most excited about right now that we're working on is a model accommodation policy. Sometimes policies sound kind of boring and, you know, oh, it's just another policy. But I think that this model, the concept of a model policy, which is something that a sort of general policy that can be adopted by any legal work environment, and that's law firms, the government, wherever that somebody is working in the law. I think this is quite an exciting advancement because it brings the issue of accommodation and inclusion to the attention of a number of different places, a number of different workplaces. So what we're doing through the committee, and so that's, we have someone from Pro Bono Students Canada helping us out through the law school, Reachability, and a number of representatives from law firms around the province, or particularly the HRM, and then of course myself, working on developing a policy that looks at how both hiring practices, when you're looking at hiring persons living with disabilities, and also clients, interaction with clients, and making sure that you have an accommodating work environment. And what we're doing is drafting a number of clauses that are generic enough that they could be accepted by all, but specific enough that they really do address the issue of inclusion and the issue of accommodation. The goal, of course, is then to have this accommodation policy completed and then available to anyone who's interested in bringing in a policy like this into their firm.
Right. So what I'm hearing is, and forgive me, I'm a big paraphraser,
but
what I'm hearing is that the group has worked as a group to create an accommodation policy that essentially is something that could be adopted even as a framework. And number one, the goal is let's bring it to the forefront like I just discussed, so that's great. Number two is providing them with something that they can then either grow with or utilize to encourage the actual implementation of accommodation policies. And again, number three, of course, is to the content of that accommodation policy being key in improving inclusion and understanding of persons with disabilities. Is that fair to say, or am I being too hopeful with your accommodation policy?
That's the goal. That
Absolutely.
Is definitely the goal. And you know, we've looked at different things, like what are the responsibilities of an employer? You know, what are the responsibilities of an individual? And so some of the things we've looked at is, for example, we're asking employers to educate themselves, at least generally, on what types of accommodations they should or think about, you know, bringing into their workplace.
So obviously you're using an additional consultation as is appropriate. You're getting all the intake from all of the different players and all of the people that would be you know, stakeholders in this issue. And what's wonderful about this is it's already happening, and I have to congratulate you because I know that it's something that has occurred rather quickly in the scheme of things, especially as an individual with a lot of things on your plate. And the fact that the accommodation policy is almost at that prepared stage is really, really impressive. Now what I'd like to do is we're going to take a quick break, but when I want to come back, and Emma, I really want to talk to you a little bit more about some of the other things that you're hoping to come out of this committee and this year with some extra focus on disability. So this is Tova Sherman on Inclusion Revolution. I'm hoping you'll join us in just a few moments after this break when Emma Halpern is going to tell us some of the important things the legal community is doing to support persons with disabilities in our community. We'll be right back.